For over half a century, there's been this quiet, constant battle waged over the very soul of higher education, right here in Ontario. It's really a story about who gets to decide what a university is for, and believe me, it has totally reshaped the academic world we see today.
And it all really boils down to this one single, crucial question. Who's in the driver's seat? Is it the academics, the people dedicated to just pursuing knowledge? Or is it the government, who's got to answer to taxpayers and the demands of the economy? That's the real conflict we're going to dig into.
So on one side, you have this ideal of university autonomy, the freedom to research, to teach, and to explore ideas without somebody looking over your shoulder. But on the other side, you've got government accountability, this constant pressure for universities to deliver a clear, measurable return on all that public money. And this tension, it's the engine that drives our entire story.
Okay, so let's wind the clock back a bit. Our story really kicks off right after World War II. And back then, the relationship between the government and universities, well, it was almost unrecognizable from what we have now. In the late 1940s, universities were just flat broke. I mean, listen to this from G.E. Hall, the president of Western at the time. He said leaders had to become beggars, literally going cap in hand to the premier just to get these totally unpredictable grants to keep the lights on. It was a simple system, sure, but it was completely arbitrary.
Now, while this meant universities were kind of stuck in what was called a state of genteel poverty, there was a silver lining for the academics. This benign neglect meant the government kept its distance, which actually preserved the university's most cherished asset, their autonomy.
But then, everything changed. You had the post-war baby boom, and this new belief that higher education was the key to economic growth, and that led to an absolute explosion in enrollment. All of a sudden, universities weren't just this quiet refuge for the elite anymore. They were becoming this critical public utility.
Of course, that kind of boom couldn't last forever. By the 1970s, you had all this economic instability, inflation, recession, rising public debt, and it created this new atmosphere of crisis. The government's whole attitude started to change.
And the language, it shifted dramatically. The conversation wasn't about intellectual potential anymore. It was about the rate of return. Politicians started throwing around phrases like needing more scholar for the dollar. And that was a huge red flag that the era of benign neglect was officially over.
So, after years of funding that just couldn't keep up with the real costs, things got serious. The government's own advisory council sent out this incredibly dire warning, declaring that the whole system was facing precipitous decline and turbulence. The golden age? Yeah, it was pretty tarnished.
And you can see the impact right here. There was a big federal policy change in 1977 when Ottawa stopped its 50-50 cost sharing for higher ed. Now, provinces got block grants to spend however they wanted. And the result in Ontario? A stunning 20% drop in per-student funding in just 5 years.
This financial pressure cooker basically set the stage perfectly for the 1990s. A new government was coming in with a radical new philosophy that was about to permanently change the university landscape.
And in 1996, the Mike Harris government's common sense revolution arrived. The impact was immediate, and it was severe. A nearly 15% cut to university operating grants in a single year.
But this was so much more than just a budget cut. It was a complete philosophical overhaul. The new government playbook was crystal clear. You're going to link education directly to the economy, you're going to measure performance with job stats, and you're going to let the market play a much bigger role through partnerships and deregulated tuition.
And this part is absolutely crucial. The government also got rid of the Ontario Council on University Affairs. You can think of it as the buffer body that, for decades, had kept things at arm's length with its analysis and advice. With it gone, there was no intermediary. The government now had a direct line of control.
So as we move into the 2000s, what started out as a revolution, well, it just became the new normal. All these market-driven ideas got cemented into the system with new laws and new institutions.
And this slide really paints the picture of the new reality. Performance indicators that tied funding directly to how many graduates got jobs, that became policy. The door was swung wide open for-profit private universities. One government report even called this administration the most directive in the history of the province. The marketplace was officially king.
But not everyone was on board. Critics like Ann Delsett Johnson, who you might know used to oversee the Maclean's university rankings, she just slammed these new performance indicators. She called the whole system nothing but folly, basically arguing that judging universities on such narrow criteria just completely misses the point about academic innovation or real quality. So this decades-long shift from autonomy to the marketplace, it had a profound, system-wide impact, for sure. But it also had a very real human cost, creating all these new pressures right inside the university walls.
See, to cope with these unpredictable budgets and all the ups and downs of enrollment, universities started to rely really heavily on a new kind of academic workforce, contingent faculty. These are non-tenured instructors hired on contracts basically to provide flexibilities so the university can scale up or down just like a business.
And there's a really key distinction to make here. We're not just talking about the classic part-timer, like a lawyer who teaches a law class on the side. We're talking about the rise of the contemporary contingent academic, a highly qualified person with a PhD for whom just stringing together precarious teaching contracts has become their full-time job.
Now, what's wild here is that Canada doesn't actually collect comprehensive data on its part-time faculty. But if you look south of the border or across the pond to the UK, you can see this contingent workforce makes up a massive part of the faculty. We're talking 39 to 45%. This has become a permanent and growing part of the modern university.
And for so many of these folks, it has created this lifestyle known as the freeway flyer, academics who are constantly crisscrossing the region, teaching courses at different universities and colleges just to piece together a living wage, often with no benefits and no job security.
And the rise of this academic underclass, it raises some really serious questions. It's not just about the exploitation of scholars. It's about what it could mean for academic quality, for academic freedom. Because for this growing group of academics who often feel totally shut out from the privileges of the academy, well, for them, there was no golden age.
And so that's what we're left with. After 60 years of this tug-of-war, the university has been fundamentally reshaped by these huge economic and political forces. The push for accountability, it transformed the whole thing into a market-driven enterprise. And that leaves us with a really critical question. When a university is run like a business, who really pays the price?